Thank you for tuning into Faces of Hope, a series brought to you by the St. Marianne Cope Shrine and Museum. Kate Mahoney leads us in candid conversations of hope and healing and inspiration from people who share the values of Marianne in their day-to-day lives and work. Today's episode, Faith Engages the Whole of Humanity. Mary Mahoney is not only a mother to Kate, but to the many who she has taught through the years as a childhood educator. Marianne has become a member of the family, and she takes cues from Marianne's ability to be present to the moment and welcoming to all.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Kate, my dear daughter.
How are you?
I'm very good. It's so good to see you this morning.
I know, it's almost like we don't live together all the time during a pandemic.
That's right. It's really good to see you.
So, no, Mom, thank you for taking a little time to help me celebrate the sisters and commemorate the feast day of Mother Marianne. And I'm really selfishly very excited that you agreed to do this because I think you have a very unique perspective and relationship. I think a lot of people probably would look to you as just the mother of this person, me, who was the recipient of a miracle from my multiple organ failure. But the truth is, you actually knew more of Mother Marianne and had a well-established relationship with the sisters through Grandma's work at the hospital and then your own time at convent school and high school, right?
Right, Kate.
Yeah. So can you dig into the memory bank and tell me what your first memory of Mother Marianne might be?
Well, I do remember being in seventh grade. That was when I went to the convent school. My family had moved from Ithaca, New York, and we had not been here too long. And that was one of the schools that was designated for some of us girls. I was from a large family, as you know, 14 children. So at any rate, Sister Anita was the teacher there. And I do remember her telling the story of Mother Marianne, which was quite an adventure. And for somebody that age, it was my first experience with someone who had encountered and engaged and committed herself to that kind of a life. And the story was intriguing, and it was also very inspiring. And you could feel the emotion also from Sister Anita in terms of the admiration and desire to really replicate as she could in her own life, the kind of commitment and love that she had for what she was doing, which was Marianne was model for.
So even you were what, 12 or 13 then, right?
12. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 12 years old, this story of a woman who has died and was a pretty big deal in terms of the nun and her role at the hospital and all this is way out in Hawaii, a place that at that time for you was worlds away, right?
Absolutely.
Still, your takeaway is the admiration and the love with which the story was told.
It was.
That's so cool.
There were still sisters there who had been to Hawaii, and they all, I'm sure, were sharing, those ventures themselves.
Yeah. Do you ever remember talking to your classmates about Mother Marianne? Like, was that a thing, or was it more in the classroom setting with the teacher?
It was in the classroom, but it also, we, and this is, not great recall in terms of any little, anything specific, but, the model meant something to all of us. Mm-hmm. And there were references to that, in terms of caring about people and sharing and generosity and all of those kinds of virtues, if you will, in terms of what this woman did, years and years ago. And at that point, that in my life, it was like ancient history.
Right.
So it was, here it was some very much alive in terms of the spirit of her work.
Mm. So so it felt current.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll jump ahead. We'll kind of jump around with this conversation. But so you're 12 years old, and that's the introduction to Mother Marianne. And then was Grandma at the hospital at that point, or that was a couple years later?
She was president of the Women's Auxiliary during the time that I was there, particularly in high school. I remember she was president of the auxiliary, and the dining room table was the site of many of her various piles, and at that point typewriter and so forth, things that she used when she was putting her meetings together or organizing for plans they had made. There was no snack bar at that point in the hospital. So try and imagine hospitals today. Cafeteria was out of sight, but they were really going to do something very innovative by having a snack bar. And that was very exciting. So.
Yeah. And it was like coffee shop too, right?
Like a little
yeah.
coffee shop. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? I mean, it's funny you mentioned Grandma. I can't picture Grandma at a typewriter. That's just because she was that much older when we were in each other's lives. But you say that, and I immediately picture that giant Smith Corona that you kept on our dining room table when you were teaching and working when I was the same age, basically. So I guess we have a history of typewriters in the dining room. But anyway, sidebar. Do you remember having conversations with Grandma? Did she reference Mother Marianne in some capacity?
I think that there was a sentiment there in terms of just, I'll speak of your grandmother as a woman, okay? Here is a very actively involved woman, and she, as you know from your own history and conversations with Mom, is that she really loved the hospital work.
Yeah.
And at that point in history, there were not that many women going in, being accepted as physicians.
Mm-hmm.
Into medical school. So this was her way, and she did that. She had done this as long as I knew. She did it when we were in Ithaca at Tompkins County Hospital, and then when she came here, she was very interested in what was going on at St. Joe's, so she got engaged, and that was a part of that. Many people in that generation. Again, I was born in 1944, so we're going back a little bit, and that women were not working as they are today. Not as many women were working, and there weren't that many professions and opportunities to be outside of work. And so Mom was pretty much, I don't want to be a stereotype about it, but she did take care of her family, and she was an organizer, which Mother Marianne was an organizer as well. Mom was organized with, 14 children, and they were in 5 different schools, and were all different kinds of things like that. But her thing for herself really was the hospital work, the organizational work that she did at St. Joe's Hospital.
Yeah.
So that was she certainly was very well aware of Mother Marianne Cope, and I feel that she had a sense in terms of who this person was, that she was somebody who did everything that she could do with the gift she had.
Right. Yeah, which again, kind of the way society was what we called women's work, or, it wasn't considered professional, but all the skill sets required were in every way ones that were utilized in professions.
Yeah, so, many different pieces to that. I'm thinking now that we're talking about Mom and some of the things that she did. They actually designed and did a whole new emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
The whole entranceway there, all of that. So there were things that these very capable women did.
Wait,
Pardon me?
Sorry to cut you off. That entrance room, that emergency room was when you were a kid and grandma was at the hospital? Or you're talking about, okay.
Well, that was back. That was one of the directives that they had. Would you be interested in doing this? So it was a fundraising project as well as working with the people who were in the design and so forth. You know, that end of the.
Oh, wow. I didn't know she did that.
Yeah,
Okay.
there were, well, like I'm saying, they were not. They were very significant endeavors,
Sure.
and they enjoyed that. So.
Yeah.
So I think I think Mom's respect for Mother Marianne was conveyed to me, certainly in
Mhm.
terms of just all of the things that she did in terms of taking initiative, which we certainly know about Mother Mary taking
Yeah.
initiative to go and answer the call, and then what was it? Beauty, goodness, and truth was part of what we learned at the convent school.
Isn't that the little pin that you have?
We do have a little pin, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that was a part of what you put into everything when you were um, just going about your daily life,
Mm-hmm. Beta
So,
gamma tau.
beta gamma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was all, if you take that as some messaging
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, this is a part of what everything I'm doing is about, it eventually takes on a character of its own in terms of, what you can do for others as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You had, I think parish community life was more universal perhaps when you were growing up in Ithaca. And not that there, maybe I shouldn't say parish life, but religious connection and everybody practicing the faith over the weekend. That was kind of routine for most of your peers, right? When you were a kid, people
Well,
were going to church or people were going to temple. That there was a familiar pattern in place that
yeah,
wasn't necessarily the same as when I was growing up. I mean, we had that part of our life, but we certainly had neighbors who were Quaker or agnostic or were not necessarily, their belief system was not through the lens of religion. And so those were different conversations that I was having at age 12 than you were. Like, I have
very different.
no recollection of us ever talking about Mother Marianne, and you referencing convent school only just was like mysterious to me because,
Mhm.
we had friends who were priests and nuns, but I didn't really know, I couldn't really relate to what you went through going to school with nuns and habits and living in a convent and being on a campus like that.
When we were going to be moving, and Dad said, that we would be going to different schools. Okay, now you're talking to all these young children. Okay, the boys were the oldest, and they were going to be in high school. So that
Mm-hmm.
was it, freshman and sophomore in high school. So, and Dad said, you girls will be going to the convent school. And we were like a little bit nervous about that because, quite honestly, I can remember the principal of our school at Immaculate Conception. Every day I would walk in with all these little toads behind me, and she'd pat me on the head. It's like, someday you will be a beautiful nun. And I was like, oh, okay. And then when Dad said we were going to the convent school, I thought, well, that's it. They've made all the decisions for us now.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that was not how it turned out to be. But
Did you and Aunt Laney and Aunt Liz and Aunt Debbie have
we
conversations
were all
about this?
talking about we were going to have to be going into the convent now, wear uniforms and things, like
Yeah.
anyway, back to the olden days. But at any rate, the convent school was a terrific experience. Of course, it was an all-girls school, and that was
Yeah.
another thing that was pretty novel to us in terms of change. But getting back to the routines in terms of of the church on the weekend, okay, if you want to talk about Mass on the weekend. We had a credenza in the front hall, and we had all of the St. Joseph missalettes and all of the little white gloves on one shelf, and the bottom shelf was all of the shoes. And Saturday you had to get all the shoes cleaned up so they all shined and clean for Sunday.
Right.
So it was always a very big day. And then and we marched. So
Yeah.
and
So
there
there's
were always baptisms. I mean, remember, each year there was always a baptism for one of the new babies.
right. So how old is at this point? Aunt Jody is like how old?
When we moved to Syracuse, Jody had just turned 1 in August when I was in 7th grade.
Yeah.
So we were all very close in age.
14 kids, triplets in the middle, 7 boys, 7 girls.
Yeah. And it went from
thought,
6 children to 9 children.
Right.
And oh my goodness. I mean, there just were always things to do. It's a wonder, homework. Here you are, the only child.
Yeah.
So I guess I have no idea how you grew up, Kate, as an only child.
I mean, I turned out okay, Mom. Thanks. So no, but let's draw those parallels. Okay. So you're one of 14, you're the oldest girl. You're in Syracuse in 7th grade, and you're at the convent school. Grandma's working at the hospital. There is a presence of Mother Marianne in some way. The action items that you maybe are following as a preteen and what Grandma and Grandpa are doing to impose order and infuse love in seeming chaos of lots of little kids with schools and activities and everything. That sets the scene for those formative years for you. And then you ultimately really found a professional home in the same field of caring for children and in education in every level. People ask me what you've done, and my generalized statement is always, you were from the bassinet to the boardroom, because in my lifetime, you've contributed in some way, or guided or mentored in every level of a person's education, whether it was through the formal higher ed system or just community building and education and populations that were in trade or business or different degrees. So between your introduction of Mother Marianne and our time in the hospital, when the request came to you about Mother Marianne and intercessory prayers in my recovery, what was your relationship or awareness to the sisters or the Franciscan model, or just how you decided to mother in your own right?
Well, I think Marianne set a very strong model in terms of her structure. She was a very structured person. She had purpose, and that was her commitment to really caregiving. So whether it was teaching, whether it was nursing, whether it was just being a good friend, taking care of others. Now, where to take that from there? I mean, that was the model, and she was very creative, very innovative. She had such faith that I'm trying to think in terms of, there's faith and there's doubt. That's something that I've been thinking about lately in terms of the differences there. And when she made a decision, I'm sure she gave great thought to it and called on the Holy Spirit and gave a lot of consideration to it. But I think her faith was always the moving dynamic with her. Mm-hmm. And her faith and her love in terms of what she was about. And so that's kind of how we were in terms of Mom's model also. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously we all have our conscience and we all are making decisions. and have deliberations. But, you know, at the end of the day, you go forward with faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, thank you for saying that. I mean, here you and I are even still getting to know one another just through this conversation, which is the relationship building that we celebrate in Mother Marianne, you know?
I don't know, Kate, if I really addressed the diversity that you were talking about in terms of the family that I grew up in in Ithaca. In our little community, we were going back and forth, and there was a lot of diversity there. But as a young child, that was not something. I mean, you know, that's not something that I was exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say that my mother's grandmother was Baptist, and Mom did tell the stories of how she would make sure that it was her job to get her grandmother to the Baptist church each week.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Mom was actually pretty ecumenical early on in her life in terms of all of the different people and community that she was involved in as a child.
Yeah.
So I think we bring all that together, and I think that that's the making of, you know, humanity in terms of how we, you know, present ourselves and what we give.
For sure. Yeah. No, I love that you said the making of humanity. I think that's what we're doing every day with ourselves and one another, you know. You have, ever since I was little, you know, whether I was 4 or 14 or 34, you have always spoken to me in a way that let me know I was a person. And the reason I say that is because I know you grew up under a little more authoritarian model of children should be seen and not heard. And of course, being the face of a Vatican approved miracle and having to do press and things like that, I came into questions and answers in a way that I thought when I was asked a question that, well, just say what you think, you know, and that has gotten me into more good than it has trouble. But it has been a challenging thing to navigate when we speak and when we listen, when I speak and when I listen as an adult. And we've been talking in a lot of these conversations about the role of silence and the role of when to step up and say something. And everyone pretty much across the board has said that Mother Marianne had that gift. And I'm just wondering, in the application, and I don't mean to put you too on the spot about this, but in the context of when I was in the hospital and on a ventilator, and they didn't know if I was going to survive. They didn't know if they were going to do a trach or not. And if they did a trach, they didn't know if I would ever be able to speak again. I'm wondering where things were in the conversation around intercessory prayers with Mother Marianne, and if that in any way informed your feelings about my voice, or if that really was just you and your take on things in context of your and my relationship.
When you're talking about you on the ventilator for what, 47 days?
I know it's hard to revisit, so thank you.
No, I am thinking with regard to also the trach, because I kept thinking, oh my goodness, with everything else that's been going on here in this intensive care unit, you know, you would have to talk. Remembered that, you know, as long as she can come out of this and be able to talk, we'll be okay. But and I don't know if I've gotten a little distracted there from the emotion of all of that particular scene, but it was living in the moment, and it's more than the moment, excuse me. It is living in the present. And there is a distinction between living in the moment and living in the present being all encompassing in terms of just there. It's like the presence of God. And there is nowhere else to go, so you are right there, wide-eyed, and, there receiving. So that is how I spent my time in that intensive care unit. It was not going into any other thinking about things that were going to be happening. It was just right there.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that is an experience that is not it's 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 awesome, really, because it holds your whole life, your whole being,
Yeah.
right there. So I think that was a gift in terms of um, mother.
Did you have, I don't know how to phrase this, because grandma was, both my grandmothers were in the picture. We were living with Grandma Mahoney, and certainly Grandma Spino was in contact with you frequently. So do you feel like you leaned on Mother Marianne the same way you leaned on your own mother and your mother-in-law? Like, is there, I'm not a mom. I'm a dog mom. I'm not a mom of a person that I birthed myself or adopted. I don't have that same relational element. And I'm just wondering the role of motherhood in the context of those decisions that you had to make around my care.
Mhm. Um, well, there's human relationships, and of course, my mother, whom I just absolutely love, and my mother-in-law the same. I was very, very fortunate, very blessed. Uh, but this was my job,
Mm.
and
So do you think you were bolstered by
I
mothers?
don't feel that I leaned on them. I think they gave me what I had.
I love that. That's
So
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you just got me very weepy on that. So thanks to all the mothers.
Well, we can say that with regard to Mother Marianne too, which would be in a much more universal way.
Yeah.
Certainly, this is from the human part in terms of my relationship with
Mhm.
Marianne and Mom. Um, that was that's what I had, and that was so wonderful, a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, I love that you said, you acknowledge the parts that you already had within you to make these decisions and to carry the weight and the
Mhm.
heaviness of what was going on in our life. But it is not without awareness of the presence of, Mother Marianne, your mom, Grandma Mahoney, and all the people who were in a mother capacity
Right.
taking
Well,
care
there
of
is
all of us.
a dimension to Kate if you look at it in terms of nature and nurture. And then you look at Mother Marianne in terms of that, in terms of the spiritual well being
Mhm.
and the spiritual strength there. Not that that's not already existing in terms of my mother in law and your grandmother,
Yeah.
but that is another dynamic, which is just an extraordinary dynamic to have had that possibility, that opportunity,
Hmm.
that gift of, is when Sister Mary Lawrence came and said, would you approve of our praying to Mother Mary Ann Cope for a miracle here? And that was, of course, I was open to that. Why wouldn't I be open to that? And of course, knowing something of her story, but it was just that again was a part of the present.
Yeah.
And as you know, we prayed to Mother Mary Ann Cope, as did all of our friends and relatives, and many of our friends of all different religions, our Jewish friends, our Muslim friends, our Baptist friends, it
Yeah.
the faith is what really I think engages the whole of
Yeah.
humanity in that
Yeah.
situation.
But, Mom, I want to go back for a second because I don't think you're even aware of it. And you're like, Sister Mary Lawrence came to me and asked if we would pray posthumously to Mother Marianne. And I was open to it. Of course, why wouldn't I be open to it? Well, I mean, that's a gift to be that open. And I think that I just don't ever want you to forget that that is something that is unique to you, because you and I have traveled all over the world and shared parts of our story with patients, caregivers, religious people, more science-focused people, because of the nature of my case. And not everybody can just be so present and equally decisive. And just this morning, I was talking with Sister Karen, who was talking about Mother Marianne, who referenced Mother Marianne having humility and action. And I see that in you so much, especially showcased in the context of my case. And you've always said, the waiting is not in action. And so to be able to say, why wouldn't I be open? It's not like you were open and then said, okay, like, let's release all the doctors from the care. Or, you've even said that in the paperwork for the intensive care admission, there was a question about specifying religious, not oversight, but like who from what faith might offer the best support. And you said you didn't check the box because you felt anybody who could offer support would be welcome. And I do think for a lot of people, that is a degree of vulnerability that does not come easily. I think some people kind of double down into the traditions that make them feel safe in a vulnerable time. And when arguably you as a mother and a daughter and a professional and just a human were very, very vulnerable, you, like Mother Marianne, going across the nation and overseas and to Hawaii and dealing with leprosy, an unknown disease, were open and welcomed the opportunity for support. And, our story ends with the fact that we received the support, and then we've tried to continue to give it and pay it forward. And that's not how everybody's story ends. And we are aware of that. We're mindful of that. But I guess all of this is just to say, like, thank you for the model of being so open in a crisis, because we're sitting here in a pandemic that is affecting people all over the world. And there's isolation, and it's hard to know how to reach out. And if reaching out and being open is not familiar, I think this conversation with you serves as a really great reminder that if you can try to be open, there are degrees of comfort with that. But if you can try to be open to the possibility that if you ask for help, you can receive it, I think that's something that is universal right now.
Well said, Kate. I think that
Thanks.
we all need to be listening to one another.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. So sorry.
No, I'm just saying that's a part of the
Yeah.
open. Yeah.
So, all right, let's get into something a little lighter. Can you speak to the parts of our life when we went to Italy to celebrate Mother Marianne and the beatification, and going to Church Piccola, which was the boyhood home of your grandfather? Can you just share an anecdote or two to infuse a little levity as well?
You mean Church Piccola? You're talking about Church Piccola?
Or the Vatican. I mean, any part of our trip.
Wonderful. Kate, you do remember you said, now we lived in Ireland for 2 years. We need to go to Church Piccola because we have to go and visit someone on Mom's side of the family.
Yeah.
Right? So off we went. And it was a wonderful experience, a lovely little town, a little hill town. But the beatification was just extraordinary. And of course, John had been was ill, but he came anyway and did very
Mom,
well.
So were you.
Oh, was I ill too?
You were still dealing with breast cancer. You always do this. You're always like, well, your father was sick and this was your story. But oh, by the way, like, you had also just wrapped up radiation.
Yeah. So then we can turn it. We could turn it to the light story if you'd like
Right.
to.
Sorry,
Yeah.
keeping it light.
Let's get right into the basilica. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have our seats, and John and I, Kate's father and I, yes, we are waiting for Abby and Kate because we know that they have been to the Via Condati. Is that where you were? Whatever.
We were in Piazza Navona.
Piazza
Yeah.
Navona. Okay. So we were waiting for them, and the crowd, was gathering in the basilica. And I think you should tell this story. I really think.
Well,
How finally you did get in there, but tell
okay,
everybody.
no, I'll tell the story, but it's about, I mean, I want it to be more about your reaction than me just, telling the story.
Okay.
But yeah, Abby and I were sitting in Piazza Navona prior to the beatification mass, which was a very big and solemn and celebratory occasion. And we were drinking wine, and it was basically daytime. So we were having cocktails in the afternoon, and we realized we were going to be late. We were probably going to be late because we just lost track of time having such a fun experience in Italy. And we ran through the cobblestone streets, and we got to the front door of St. Peter's Basilica, and we could not get in. So we ran around to the side thinking that it was like any church where there would be or any edifice really that might have a side entrance. And there was signage all in Italian, something Papa. And we didn't think anything of it because we were focused on how late we were, and we were able to get in the side door. So we came running in the side door, only to realize we were on the main altar in front of 1,100 people, or I mean, there were thousands of people because it was a big occasion. There were cardinals and bishops and the sisters from different parts of the globe and everywhere. And yeah, my recollection is us running and kind of lurching and then slinking to our seats. And I found you and Pop in the congregation because you were kind of near the front, and I just physically watched you guys lower in your seats. So now you share what was happening on your end.
Well, we were delighted to see you, Kate. Delighted. And the family that had moved in and taken your seats that had been designated I did not speak German, so it was kind of difficult, but I just said, fine, and pointed to you as you remember, say, find a seat.
Yeah. So yeah, we sat 4 rows back from you guys instead of together, which is kind of our brand as a family. We're never doing anything at the same time. Yeah.
Well, anyway, I don't know. We had a wonderful, wonderful time, and it was such a great occasion. And the sisters sang, and also another friend, was it Donna's mother, sang in the choir.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Donna Kaplan's mother sang, who we didn't meet until just actually this fall.
Yeah.
At the Women's National Hall of Fame, we were there. It was by appointment only. There were about 8 people in the Women's National Hall of Fame, and I heard the one woman say, "Oh, Mother Marianne Cope is here in the National Women's Hall of Fame," and I just looked over and made a little comment that we had that you were there, that it was important to acknowledge that, and she was very excited that and she shared that story with us at that time.
Right. And her husband had gone to high school with some of your brothers.
Yeah.
So again, I mean,
my family.
Mother Marianne, Mother Marianne is so in our life. Yeah.
She is in our life, and it's kind of fun because we get parking places wherever we go, and she's a humorous person in my life.
Yeah.
I think that's it. It's just kind of a natural, lovely gift that we have with this whole experience with Mother Marianne Cope. And there's so much more to know about her, particularly in these times. She had more strength and capability and vision. And I think we can turn to her in these days.
I'm sorry, I lost the
But
last
we
part of
can
it.
turn to her in these days of
Yeah.
pandemic, of grief, of isolation, of all the suffering that's going on.
Mhm.
And of course, we go back to her childhood, and she certainly had a role in taking care of her father, who was not well, and she knew what suffering meant in terms of
Yeah.
the blessings too from suffering.
Yeah. Mom, if you could pick one word, if somebody said, I don't know anything about Mother Marianne, and I need you to just tell me in one word, what might that word be for you in context of your relationship with her and your knowledge of her?
I think love.
Love. Well, I love you, and I love that we had the chance to do this. And thank you so much for wanting to participate in the celebration of the sisters, our cultivating relationships and friendships and sisterhood with them, and the acknowledgement and of the impact of Mother Marianne in this time and in all the times that have been and that are yet to come, when people start to get to know Mother Marianne as they look for more support in what is unknown and what they want to do and need support for. Thank you, Mom. Mwah.
Thank you, honey. I also have to say hope also because of all the possibilities.
Yeah.
Thank
Hope.
you, Kate. Thank you very much.
All right.